Before we can write code, we must learn how to read code. You certainly want to be able to read and understand all the code that you're seeing in examples, in the exercises, etc. In this course, we're learning how to read code using just two understandings. Throughout the course, there'll just be two ways to read code, and they work together. The first is statements and object types, and we looked at this in the first session. We're going to see a lot of different statements in this course, but the ones we saw in the first session give you a good sense of what this means. It means what object types go into the statement and what object types are returned from the statement or come out of the statement. So every one of the statements that we looked at in the first week, functions and then also operators, involve specific object types and involved output of specific object types. And this is just a small example. Len takes a string as an argument. That's the input to Len. And Len returns an integer. That's just understood. That's how Len works. So when you're reading your code or when you're writing your outline, you're considering what features are available, what statements are available, what object types it requires, and what preparation you need to make to be able to use that statement. But there's another kind of understanding that's necessary for reading code, and it's called program flow. Program flow refers to which lines are executed and in what order. Now, of course, in our first session, we understand program flow to be reading code from top to bottom. So line 1, line 2, line 3. We did learn that comments are ignored and that blank lines are also ignored. And so when we look at code like this, we can see that there are two operative code lines. The code on line 13 and the code on line 16. And these are basically the only statements that are going to be executed, and they're going to be executed from top to bottom. So first, now I've moved it up, line 12 and then line 13. And that's been program flow for us for the first week. But now we're going to look at something called conditionals. Conditionals allow us to decide which part of the program will be executed. With conditionals, the entire program is not going to get executed on any one run. The statements are all designed to be executed, of course, but depending on the input, depending on the conditions under which the program is running, and specifically the values of certain variables, the program will execute either some lines or other lines, maybe all the lines, maybe even just a few of the lines. Here's a very, very simple example. You can see on this line we're taking user input, getting back a string, converting that string to integer, and now our first if statement. We're checking to see if the integer is less than or equal to 100. And if it is, and I should have put extra indent spaces here, this is a mistake. It's because I'm not in PyCharm. If the number is greater than or less than or equal to 100, then the program will exit. We're going to look at this in more detail, but I wanted you to see a simple example. If the number is less than or equal to 100, we will exit. Otherwise, we will print these two print statements. So conditionals allow us to say what will be executed and what won't. We can think of a really, really simple example, an ATM machine, because we've all worked with ATM machines. In the beginning, when you start an ATM machine, when you put in your card and it identifies you, it begins by asking you for your password. Then it checks the password against its own valid passwords list, wherever it's getting it from the network. And if the password is not correct, it shows an error screen. Now this is written in pseudocode, but as you can see, I'm using indents to indicate what goes into the if statement. If the password's not correct, we're going to show the error screen, and you know that that's the case if you've ever put in the wrong password. Otherwise, and again, this is pseudocode, not Python, we'll show the menu screen. At that point, we're going to make a selection. And again, what the program does is dependent on an input. This is the whole point. So if the user clicks Show Balance, the program will go ahead and show the account screen. And at that point, the user gets to decide whether or not they want to see checking or savings. So if they click checking, it's going to show the checking balance. And if they click savings, they're going to see, guess, the savings balance. Now, look closely at this, because what I've done is I've nested my if statements. Again, this isn't Python code, as you can see. This is pseudocode, but it's using the indents to effectively show what's going to get executed and what won't. As you can see in this indent, if the password is not correct, then it'll show an error screen. But otherwise, if it is correct, it goes through an entire group of things that it'll do. It'll show the menu screen and then another if statement. As you can see, this if statement is nested inside the else statement, which indicates that we're never going to see show balance, we're never going to see the menu screen unless the user types the correct password. If they do type the correct password, we will see the menu screen, and then we'll have another if statement. If they click show balance, then show the account screen. And if they click checking, it'll show the checking balance. Of course, when I say account screen, I mean it'll show, let's say, checking and savings. So this is just pseudocode, but it's pseudocode that you're going to use to outline your program when you show what the conditionals of your program are. Your program is going to make certain decisions about what it wants to do next based on the input and based sometimes on other conditions. So it's kind of exciting, because your program can have a good number of conditional statements, and usually does actually, in which it will execute portions of its code depending on the conditions. And as you can see, it's possible to have very complex logic, and most programs actually do. Very complex logic on what it will do under multiple circumstances. In other words, we're not going to see get cash unless the user puts in the correct password, they click get cash, and there's enough money in the account and we haven't gone over the withdrawal limit. So you see 3 conditions have led to line 22 here in this pseudocode example. And this is the concept behind conditionals.